Today is your sister's birthday. We can't come, my mother said, 3 hours after I told her my husband and 2 children were dead. That sentence. 7 seconds of silence on the phone before she hung up. I stood in the hospital hallway, still wearing the scrubs I'd clocked in with that morning, and the world just stopped. My husband Jake, my daughter Lily, my son Noah, gone, and my mother chose a birthday cake over their caskets. But that phone call didn't break me, it freed me. Because 6 months later, one newspaper headline about what I did with the $5 million Jake secretly left behind sent my entire family into a panic they never recovered from. What my family doesn't know yet is that their absence at that funeral didn't just lose them a daughter, it lost them everything. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love knowing who's listening. My name is Bianca Myers. I'm 34 years old, and I'm an ER nurse in Hartford, Connecticut. Now, let me take you back to a November evening, the night I lost everything and found out exactly who my family really was. Before that night, my life was small and good. Not flashy. Not Instagram-worthy. Just good. Jake and I lived in a 3-bedroom colonial off Route 4 in Farmington, about 20 minutes outside Hartford. He was a software engineer at a mid-sized tech firm in Glastonbury. I worked the night shift at Mercy General. We'd bought the house 2 years earlier with a modest down payment and a lot of optimism. Lily was 6. She had Jake's brown eyes and my stubbornness. Noah was 4. He carried a stuffed bear named Captain everywhere. The grocery store, the bathtub, church on Sundays. We met because Jake sliced his hand open helping a coworker move a desk. He walked into my ER at 2 a.m, bleeding through a dish towel, and asked me if the stitches would leave a cool scar. I told him no. He asked for my number anyway. That was Jake. Steady. Warm. The kind of man who remembered your coffee order after hearing it once. In the Ashford family, my birth family, I was the invisible one. The eldest daughter who never caused trouble, never asked for money, never needed rescuing. I paid my own way through nursing school. I planned my own wedding. A small ceremony at the courthouse because my parents said they didn't have the budget for anything bigger. They had the budget for Megan's Sweet 16 the same year. 70 guests. A DJ. Every holiday, I cooked. I cleaned. I bought the gifts. My mother Linda never once asked how my shifts were going or whether Lily had started kindergarten. Her calls always opened the same way. "What are you bringing for dinner?" Jake saw it before I did. One Thanksgiving, loading the car after I'd spent 9 hours in my mother's kitchen, he turned to me and said, "Your family treats you like the help, Bianca." I said what I always said. "They're just like that. It's fine." It wasn't fine, but I didn't know that yet. And Jake, quiet, steady Jake, had already started planning for the day I'd finally figure it out. November 14th, a Tuesday. I was halfway through my shift when the charge nurse touched my shoulder. "Bianca, break room. Now." I knew that voice. I'd used it myself. The careful, controlled tone we reserved for delivering the worst news a person could hear. I followed her down the corridor. My legs already knew. 2 Connecticut state troopers stood inside. One held his hat against his chest. The other couldn't look at me. "Mrs. Myers, there's been an accident on Route 44. Jake had picked Lily and Noah up from swim lessons at the YMCA. They were 7 minutes from home. A man named Gerald Fenton, 41 years old, blood alcohol level twice the legal limit, ran a red light at 53 miles per hour and hit the passenger side of our Honda Accord. Jake died at the scene. Lily died in the ambulance. Noah made it to Mercy General, my hospital, my ER. But I was in the break room when they brought him in. He was gone before I reached the trauma bay. 3 minutes. That's what the trooper said. 3 minutes between my break room and Noah's last breath. I don't remember sitting down. I remember the floor, the cold linoleum, the fluorescent light buzzing above me like it didn't know the world had just ended. My coworker Angela knelt beside me. She didn't say anything. She just held my hand. At some point, I don't know how much later, I picked up my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the screen. I called my mother. It was instinct, primal. When everything falls apart, you call your mom. The phone rang 4 times. I heard music in the background. Laughter. Megan's voice singing off-key. Then my mother picked up. Hello? Bianca? Make it quick. We're about to cut the cake. Mom. My voice cracked on the word. Jake is dead. Lily and Noah are dead. I need you. Silence. 3 seconds. 5. I could hear the party behind her. Someone clinking a glass. A child laughing. Then my mother's voice dropped low, the way it always did when she didn't want guests to overhear something unpleasant. Bianca, I hear you. That's terrible. But today is Megan's birthday. We have 30 people here. We can't just leave. I pressed the phone harder against my ear, sure I'd misheard. Mom, my husband, my children, they're gone. I know, honey. But what do you want me to do right now? Megan will be devastated if we leave her party. Call your friend. The one from the hospital. She'll help you. I'll call you tomorrow, okay? She hung up. 9:47 p.m. 3 minutes and 12 seconds. I know, because I stared at the call log for an hour afterward. I called my father next. Donald Ashford picked up on the second ring. I could hear him stepping outside. The creak of the screen door. Wind against the receiver. Dad, did Mom tell you? A pause. Then, yeah, kiddo. She mentioned it. We'll come see you next week. Hang in there. He hung up too. 1 call left. Megan. It went to voicemail. I left a message I don't remember recording. 2 hours later, she texted back. Mom told me. So sorry, call me TMRW. I sat on that hospital floor until my shift supervisor found me at midnight. 3 calls. 3 chances for my family to show up. 3 doors slammed shut. And that's the moment I understood something I'd spent 34 years pretending wasn't true. My family didn't forget me. They didn't get confused or overwhelmed. They looked at the worst night of my life, weighed it against a sheet cake and some balloons, and made their choice. The funeral was on a Saturday, November 18th. It rained. A cold, steady Connecticut rain that turned the cemetery grass into mud. Pastor Grace Bennett from Greenfield Community Church presided. She'd baptized both Lily and Noah. When I told her what happened, she drove to my house at 6 in the morning with coffee and a binder full of hymn options. She didn't ask about my family. She just said, "Tell me what they loved." Lily loved butterflies. Noah loved his bear captain. Jake loved Bruce Springsteen. So we played If I Should Fall Behind while the rain drummed against the tent canopy, and I stood in front of 3 caskets, 1 full-sized, 2 impossibly small, and tried to say goodbye to my entire world. My co-workers came. Angela, Denise, Marcus, Dr. Patel from the ER. They wore black scrubs under their coats because they'd come straight off shift. Tom Whitfield, Jake's college roommate, flew in from Boston on a red-eye. He stood beside me the whole service, holding an umbrella over my head even though his own shoulder was soaked. I put Captain inside Noah's casket. I clipped Lily's butterfly barrette onto her pillow. I touched Jake's hand one last time and whispered something I'll keep between us. Then I looked at the front row. The chairs reserved for family. Empty. All 4 of them. White folding chairs beating with rainwater. Not one Ashford. Pastor Grace followed my gaze. She reached over and squeezed my wrist. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. After the burial, Tom helped me carry flowers to the car. He stopped at the driver's side and looked at me with an expression I can still picture. Confusion mixed with something sharper. Bianca, where's your family? I shook my head. That was all I could manage. Tom stared at me for a long time, rain running down his face. He nodded once. He didn't ask again. But I could tell. He was filing it away. Somewhere behind those journalist eyes, a clock had started ticking. 1 week after the funeral, my mother called. I almost didn't pick up. But 34 years of conditioning is hard to override in 7 days. My thumb hit the green button before my brain caught up. Bianca, Thanksgiving is next Thursday. Are you bringing the casserole? Megan wants the green bean one. I held the phone away from my ear and stared at it, like the screen might rearrange itself into something that made sense. 3 caskets, 7 days, and my mother was asking about casserole. Mom, I just buried my family. I know, honey. That's exactly why you need to be around people. Come for Thanksgiving. It'll be good for you. Sitting alone in that house isn't healthy. Her voice was warm, concerned, reasonable. If you'd overheard the conversation without context, you'd think she was a caring mother reaching out to her grieving daughter. That was the thing about Linda Ashford. She always sounded like the good guy. But I heard the machinery underneath. Come to Thanksgiving. Bring the casserole. Sit in the kitchen. Serve the family. Smile. Perform. And by dessert, the funeral would become an inconvenience that happened last month, filed away between Megan's dental bills and Dad's garage project. I can't do that, Mom. Don't be dramatic. We're your family. I hung up. No explanation, no argument. First time in my life. She called back 4 times. I let it ring. She left a voicemail. Bianca, this is ridiculous. You cannot just shut people out. Call me back. I stood in my kitchen, Jake's coffee mug still on the counter, Lily's drawing of a purple horse still on the fridge, Noah's booster seat still at the table. And I understood something with absolute clarity. If I went back to that Thanksgiving table, I would never leave it. I would spend the rest of my life serving people who couldn't be bothered to attend my children's funeral. That wasn't going to happen. Not anymore. I typed one message into the family group chat. No capitals, no exclamation points. Just, I need space. Please don't contact me. I'll reach out when I'm ready. Then I set the phone down and waited. Linda's response came in 90 seconds. This is unacceptable. You do not get to just disappear on this family. Donald, 2 minutes later. Your mother is very upset. Please call her. Megan, an hour later. Wow, okay. Guess I don't have a sister anymore. Cool. I blocked all 3 numbers. I muted the group chat. I sat on the edge of my bed in a house that still smelled like Jake's aftershave and let the silence settle around me like snow. The next morning, I called a therapist. Dr. Ellen Shaw had an office on Asylum Avenue, an unfortunate street name for a grief counselor, but she came highly recommended. Small room, 2 armchairs, a box of tissues on every surface. In our first session, she asked a question that knocked the wind out of me. When was the last time your family showed up for you? I opened my mouth, closed it, thought about birthdays, graduations, Lily's first steps, Noah's first word. Thought about who was there and who wasn't. The answer sat in my chest like a stone. Silence. Dr. Shaw nodded. She didn't push. We'll start there, she said. I went back to work the following week. My colleagues covered for me without being asked. Angela swapped shifts. Marcus handled my charts. Dr. Patel assigned me to lower acuity cases until I found my footing. One night, a DUI victim came in. 19 years old. Shattered pelvis. I made it to the supply closet before my knees buckled. Tom Whitfield called that same week. Just checking in. How are you, really? I'm surviving, I told him. That's enough for now. Jake's lawyer called me, Tom said. Robert Calloway. He needs to talk to you about some paperwork Jake filed. You know him? I didn't. I didn't know Jake had a lawyer at all. Robert Calloway's office was on the 2nd floor of a brick building in West Hartford, above a bakery that made the whole stairwell smell like sourdough. He was a tall man, mid-50s, with reading glasses and a handshake that felt like a promise. Jake and I went to Yukon together, he said, settling into his chair. We stayed in touch. He came to see me about 8 months before the accident. 8 months. That would have been March. Around the time Jake had started locking his home office door for an hour every Sunday evening, I'd assumed he was working. Robert slid a manila envelope across the desk. Jake purchased a term life insurance policy 8 months before the accident. $5 million. You are the sole beneficiary. He paused. Because the policy was less than 2 years old, the carrier did a routine investigation. It took about 4 months, but everything checked out. Jake was in perfect health when he applied. The accident was caused entirely by the other driver, and there was no question about the claim. The funds are ready for disbursement. I didn't move. The number didn't register at first. It was too large, too foreign, like hearing a word in a language I didn't speak. 5 million? He was making good money at the firm. Excellent health, non-smoker, 35 years old. The premiums were manageable. He set it up specifically because... Robert paused, choosing his words. He told me about your family situation, Bianca, not in detail. He just said, if something happens to me, she'll be alone. Her family won't help her. I need to know she's covered. There was a letter inside the envelope. Jake's handwriting. The left-handed scrawl I used to tease him about. I didn't read it in the office. That felt too public. But Robert told me the last line. He said Jake had asked him to, if I seemed hesitant. You always take care of everyone else. Let me take care of you this one last time. I pressed the envelope against my chest and cried. Not the hollow, shocked crying from the hospital floor. This was different. This was warm. This was the grief of being loved so completely by someone who knew, who always knew, that the people who should have protected me never would. Jake couldn't save himself, but he'd reached across death to save me. I didn't touch the money for weeks after it cleared. It sat in an escrow account while I stared at the ceiling every night, trying to figure out what a person does with $5 million that arrived because her family died. Spending it on myself felt wrong. Saving it felt hollow. The number was a ghost, Jake-shaped, Lily-shaped, Noah-shaped, and I couldn't look at it without seeing their faces. Dr. Shaw was the one who cracked it open. What would Jake want you to do with this? I thought about that for a long time. I thought about the 19-year-old DUI victim in my ER, the one whose mother sat in the waiting room for 6 hours, in the same clothes she'd been wearing when the police showed up at her door. I thought about the nights after Jake's funeral when I couldn't sleep and Googled financial help for families of drunk driving victims and found almost nothing in Connecticut. I thought about sitting alone in that cemetery in the rain. No family should face what I faced alone, I said. The idea took shape slowly, then all at once. A foundation. Not a memorial plaque or a bench in a park. Something that worked. That paid for funerals when families couldn't afford them, that covered rent for the first 3 months of shock, that connected survivors with grief counselors who actually returned their calls. I phoned Robert that evening. I want to start a foundation, in Jake's name, and Lily's, and Noah's. I'll set it up, he said. 501c3. We'll do this right. I kept a portion for myself. Enough to pay off the mortgage, build an emergency fund, breathe without panic. Jake would have insisted. He was practical like that, and I was an ER nurse. I knew how to triage. What I didn't know was that this decision, quiet, private, made in a therapist's office on a Tuesday afternoon, would eventually land on the front page of a newspaper. And that front page would reach a house in Glastonbury, where a woman named Linda Ashford was about to discover that the daughter she'd dismissed had become someone she couldn't ignore. While I built the foundation, the truth was building something of its own. In a town like Farmington, nothing stays secret. People talk at the diner. They talk after church. They talk in the checkout line at Stop and Shop. And the question that kept circling back, over coffee, over casseroles, over choir practice at Greenfield Community Church, was a simple one. Where was Bianca's family? Pastor Grace never said a word publicly. She didn't need to. She'd presided over a funeral with 3 caskets and an empty front row. People noticed. People remembered. It started small. Linda was at the church potluck in January when Barbara Hensley from the Women's Fellowship asked, "How's Bianca doing? We heard about the accident. Just awful." My mother smiled her church smile, the one that looked like concern but cost her nothing. "She's doing fine. Just needs some time." Then Carol Dunning, our neighbor of 22 years, the woman who'd watched me grow up, asked the question Linda wasn't ready for. "Were you at the funeral, Linda? I didn't see you." "We had a family commitment that day." Carol looked at her. Didn't blink, didn't nod, just looked. Then she picked up her plate and moved to another table. Megan felt it too. Her friends started asking about me. She gave them the script. My sister is being dramatic. She cut us off for no reason. It worked. Until someone asked the follow-up. Wait, you didn't go to the funeral? Megan had no good answer for that. My mother called my father into the kitchen one evening. I know this because Donald told me later, in a text message I wasn't expecting. Linda stood at the counter, arms crossed, jaw tight. We need to get Bianca back before this gets worse. People are talking. Not, we need to apologize. Not, we were wrong. Not, our grandchildren are dead and we didn't say goodbye. People are talking. That was what mattered. The image, the story, the performance. Linda Ashford had spent 61 years directing the family narrative, and for the first time, someone else was holding the pen. By March, 4 months after the accident, the foundation paperwork was nearly complete. Robert had filed the 501c3 application. I'd drafted a mission statement at my kitchen table at 2 a.m, still in scrubs, with Jake's letter propped against the salt shaker. I had a name, the Myers Family Foundation. I also had a purpose. And for the first time since November, I woke up in the morning with a reason to get out of bed that wasn't just obligation. Meanwhile, my mother was busy too. Linda had a network. Church friends, neighborhood acquaintances, a cousin in Glastonbury, who heard things from a paralegal, who knew a financial planner. Word traveled the way it always does in small-town Connecticut. Slowly, then everywhere, at once. Someone mentioned at a fellowship dinner that Bianca Myers had received a significant insurance payout. Someone else mentioned the word foundation. By the time the information reached Linda, it had been rounded up and polished into something irresistible. Jake left her money, Linda told my father. Insurance. A lot. How much? Donald asked. Enough that she's starting some kind of charity. I can picture my father in that moment, sitting in his recliner, beer on the armrest, staring at the muted television, doing the math. Not the emotional math, the financial math. Maybe we should call her, he said. But Linda was smarter than a phone call. She knew I'd blocked them. So she went to Pastor Grace instead. Pastor, my daughter is grieving and she's pushing everyone away. We're worried about her. Could you help us bring the family together? Maybe a prayer meeting? Something gentle. Pastor Grace listened. She nodded slowly. She said, I'll think about it, Linda. But later that night, alone in her study, Grace Bennett sat with the memory of 3 caskets and 4 empty chairs, and she thought very carefully about what gentle meant to a woman like Linda Ashford. 2 weeks later, Tom Whitfield called. Bianca, I pitched a feature to my editor about DUI victim advocacy in Connecticut. I disclosed that Jake was a friend. She approved it on the condition that I focus on the systemic angle, not just your story. But your foundation is the centerpiece. DUI victim advocacy in Connecticut. What exists? What doesn't? Where the gaps are? Your foundation fits perfectly. Would you be open to an interview? I hesitated. Publicity wasn't something I'd ever sought. I was a night shift ER nurse. My idea of public speaking was reading triage notes to an attending at 3 a.m. But Tom wasn't asking me to perform. He was asking me to tell the truth. And the truth was the only thing I had left that still felt solid. Okay, I said. But I'm not doing this for attention. I know. That's why it matters. We met at a coffee shop near the hospital. Tom set up a recorder between our mugs and let me talk. I told him about Jake, the stitches, the scar question, the Sunday evenings behind a locked office door that turned out to be insurance research. I told him about Lily's butterflies and Noah's bear. I told him about the foundation and the 5 families we'd already identified for our first round of support. Then he asked the question, You organized the funeral alone? I stirred my coffee. Jake's friends were there, my coworkers, my pastor. Tom waited. He was good at silence. My birth family wasn't. He didn't press. He just wrote it down. Before he left, he asked if he could include that detail. I thought about it for exactly one breath. You can say what's true. I won't ask you to hide anything, but I won't add drama either. At the same time, and I only learned this later, Linda was on the phone with Megan. Her voice had the brittle urgency of a woman watching a story slip through her fingers. We need to talk to Bianca before other people start telling our story for us. Megan snorted. What story? We didn't do anything wrong. Exactly, Linda said, and we need to make sure people know that. Tom told me the piece would take a few more weeks. He needed to interview other families and fact-check with Mad before the editors would run it. The Ashfords had no idea it was coming. Linda worked fast. Within a week, she had Pastor Grace cornered after Sunday service. Pastor, I've been praying about this. Could we do a small reconciliation meeting? Just family and a few close friends. Nothing formal. Just prayer and conversation. Pastor Grace agreed, reluctantly. But she set one condition. I will not pressure Bianca, Linda. This has to be her choice. Of course, my mother said. Of course. Then Linda went home and called every woman in her contact list. By Saturday, what was supposed to be a small family meeting had swelled to 20 people. The entire Women's Fellowship Board, 3 couples from the neighborhood, and Carol Dunning, who Linda specifically invited because Carol's earlier question at the potluck still burned. Linda wanted an audience. She wanted witnesses who would see her cry, see her reach out, and conclude that Bianca was the problem. The invitation reached me through a text from a number I didn't recognize. Linda had borrowed a friend's phone. Bianca, Pastor Grace is organizing a family prayer meeting this Sunday. Everyone in church wants to see you. Please come. For your children's memory. For your children's memory. She used their names like currency. I called Pastor Grace immediately. Did you set this up? Grace sighed. Your mother asked for a small gathering. I agreed to that. But I just heard she's invited half the congregation. Bianca, I'm concerned about what she's planning. I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot and thought about it for a long time. The old Bianca would have stayed home, would have protected herself. But the old Bianca also would have brought a casserole to Thanksgiving 3 weeks after burying her children. I wasn't her anymore. I'll be there, I told Grace. Not for my mother. For me. Grace was quiet for a moment. Then, I want you to know something. I told your mother I was at the funeral that day. She didn't blink, Bianca. She didn't even blink. Sunday. 2 o'clock. The fellowship room at Greenfield Community Church. I walked in and counted. 22 people. Chairs arranged in a loose semicircle. Coffee urn on a folding table. A plate of cookies someone had brought because in Connecticut, even ambushes come with baked goods. My mother sat in the front row. She wore her lavender church dress, the one she reserved for occasions when she wanted to look soft. Her eyes were already red. A white handkerchief rested on her lap, pre-positioned. My father sat beside her, shoulders squared, staring at a spot on the carpet. Megan stood near the back wall, arms crossed, jaw tight. She looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Linda stood up the moment I took a seat. She didn't wait for Pastor Grace to open the meeting. Thank you all for being here. Her voice trembled beautifully. As many of you know, our family has been through a terrible time. My daughter Bianca lost her husband and children in a horrible accident. We've tried to be there for her, but she's pushed us away. She dabbed the handkerchief under one eye. We're heartbroken. All we want is our daughter back. Murmurs, nods, sympathetic glances aimed at Linda. She was good at this. The trembling chin, the measured pauses, the way she made grief look like something that was happening to her. Barbara Hensley leaned forward. Bianca, your mother loves you. Family is everything. I sat still, hands on my knees, watching. Then Megan, from the back of the room, added her voice. I've texted her so many times, she won't even answer. I lost a brother-in-law, and a niece and nephew too. You know. 22 heads turned to me. 22 faces waiting for me to apologize, to cry, to fold. I stood up. The room went quiet. May I speak? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. My husband and 2 children died on November 14th. I called my mother from the hospital that night. She told me she couldn't come because it was Megan's birthday party. The room was already still, but now it hardened. Like the air itself had turned to glass. She said, "We can't just leave. We'll visit next week." Linda opened her mouth. "That's not—" "I have the call log, Mom. 9:47 p.m., 3 minutes and 12 seconds. She closed her mouth. My father told me to hang in there. My sister texted me a crying emoji and said, "Call me tomorrow." Nobody came to the hospital. Nobody came the next day. Nobody came to the funeral. I looked at Pastor Grace. She met my eyes and nodded once. Pastor Grace was there, she can confirm. Grace's voice was steady. The family seats were empty. Someone in the second row inhaled sharply. Carol Dunning put her hand over her mouth. Barbara Hensley set her coffee down and didn't pick it up again. Linda's composure cracked. Just a fracture, but visible. "We had commitments. We couldn't just—" "Your commitment was a birthday party." I kept my voice level. My commitment was burying my 6-year-old daughter. Nobody spoke. The cookies sat untouched. The coffee urn hissed softly in the corner. "I didn't come here to argue," I said. "I came because you asked. Now you've heard both sides." I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it the way you close a chapter. Quietly, completely. In the parking lot, footsteps behind me. Megan. Out of breath. "Bianca, wait. That's not fair. You're making us look terrible." I unlocked my car. "I didn't make you look like anything, Megan. I told them what happened." She stood in the gravel lot with her arms at her sides, and for the first time she had nothing to say. I pulled out of the lot, and in my rearview mirror I could see her still standing there, smaller than I'd ever seen her. 3 weeks after the church meeting, Tom's article finally went live. He'd spent the extra time interviewing other DUI families and MAD representatives, turning what started as my story into something bigger. The headline sat at the top of the Hartford Courant's Sunday Features section. After losing her family to a drunk driver, Hartford nurse turns grief into a mission. Tom wrote about Jake, the engineer who quietly planned for the worst because he'd watched a coworker's family fall apart after a sudden death. He wrote about Lily, who wanted to be a marine biologist, and Noah, who introduced Captain the Bear to every new person he met. He wrote about Bianca's mission, how she'd already personally helped 5 families affected by drunk driving accidents, covering funeral costs, rent, and counseling out of her own pocket, while the formal 501c3 application for the Myers Family Foundation worked its way through the IRS. The foundation wasn't yet official, but the work was already real. And in the 7th paragraph, one sentence. Myers organized the funeral with the help of coworkers and friends. Her birth family, she said, was unable to attend. That was it. No names, no accusations, no adjectives. Just 8 words that landed like a dropped piano. The article was shared 4,000 times in the first 48 hours. NBC Connecticut called on Monday. MAD's Connecticut chapter emailed on Tuesday. A producer from a Hartford radio station left a voicemail asking if I'd come on air. My inbox filled with messages from strangers. A woman in Bridgeport. "My son was killed by a drunk driver last year. I couldn't afford his burial. Thank you for what you're doing." A retired firefighter in New Haven. "Your husband was a good man. You're honoring him right." I sat at my kitchen table reading those messages until 3 in the morning. The house was quiet. Jake's mug was still on the counter. I hadn't moved it, and I wasn't going to. Lily's purple horse drawing was still on the fridge. Noah's booster seat was still at the table. I wasn't looking for attention. I wasn't trying to expose anyone. I was just building something so that 3 lives wouldn't be reduced to a police report number, but attention has its own plans. And 30 miles away, in a house in Glastonbury, a woman named Linda Ashford was about to open her phone to a text message from her neighbor Carol that read, "Linda, is this your Bianca?" Linda read the article 3 times. I know because Megan told me later, during one of her visits I didn't ask for, that their mother sat at the kitchen table with her reading glasses on and her lips pressed into a white line, Scrolling. Then the phone calls started. Barbara Hensley called first. Polite. Careful. Linda, I saw the article about Bianca. That poor girl. I had no idea about the foundation. What a beautiful thing she's doing. Pause. It mentioned the funeral, that the family wasn't there. It's complicated, Barbara. Of course. Click. Her sister in Florida called next, Aunt Rachel, less polite. Linda, tell me you were at that funeral. It's complicated. Silence. A long one. Then, what was complicated about it? At church that Sunday, the seats around Linda thinned. Nobody confronted her. Nobody had to. The architecture of a small-town social circle doesn't require confrontation. It just requires a slight turning of chairs, a half-second delay before someone says hello, an invitation that doesn't arrive. Pastor Grace didn't mention the article from the pulpit. She preached about presence, about showing up, about the difference between saying you love someone and proving it. Linda sat through the sermon with her back straight and her hands folded, and didn't stay for coffee afterward. Megan got it worse online. A mutual friend posted the article with a caption, "This is the kind of person the world needs." Someone commented, "Imagine choosing a birthday party over your niece and nephew's funeral." Megan's name wasn't in the article, but in a small town, it didn't need to be. She deactivated her Facebook by Wednesday. Donald retreated to the garage. He sat on a folding chair next to his workbench, drank Budweiser, and didn't talk to anyone. He didn't need the internet to know what he'd done. He'd always known. And then Linda left me a voicemail. Not from a borrowed phone this time, from her own number, as if daring me to pick up. Her voice was stripped of the church meeting tremble. Raw. Hard. "Bianca, that article is destroying us. You need to fix this. Call that reporter and tell him to take it down." No apology. No, "I'm sorry." Not even, "How are you?" Just, "Fix this." Megan showed up on a Thursday evening, unannounced. I was in the kitchen making pasta, one serving, the way I'd learned to cook now, when the doorbell camera buzzed. There she was on the screen. Puffy eyes, messy ponytail, clutching her purse strap like a lifeline. She looked the way she always looked when she wanted something, wounded and slightly rehearsed. Part of me, the part Dr. Shaw was teaching me to listen to, wanted to see if Megan had actually changed, if the church meeting had cracked something open. So I opened the door. "Can I come in?" she whispered. "Please." I let her in. I poured her a glass of water. I sat across from her at the kitchen table, the table where Noah's booster seat still occupied the fourth chair, and I waited. Megan cried for 10 minutes straight. Real tears or performance tears. With Megan, I'd stopped being able to tell. She wiped her face with her sleeve and launched in. "Bianca, I can't take this anymore. Everyone hates us. Mom won't stop crying. Dad won't talk to anyone. I miss you." She glanced at the fridge, at Lily's drawing. "I miss Lily and Noah." First time she said their names since the emoji text. "I know I wasn't there," she continued. "I know it was wrong. But you have to understand. Mom said we'd go the next week, and I listened to Mom. I always listen to Mom." I nodded. "I understand." She seemed to relax. The tears slowed. She smoothed her hair. And then, like a door swinging open to reveal the room behind it, the real conversation started. "So, Jake left you money, right? The article mentioned the foundation. 5 million? She tried to sound casual. She failed. "That's a lot to manage alone. I could help. Like, be on the board or something. I'm between jobs right now and..." I set my glass down. "Megan, you didn't come to their funeral. You didn't call me for 3 months. And the first real conversation we're having, you're asking about money." Her face flushed. "That's not what I think you should go." She stood, grabbed her purse. At the door, she turned back with the only weapon she'd ever known how to use. "Mom is going to be really upset about this." I closed the door, gently, the way you close something you don't intend to open again. I called Robert the next morning. My family is starting to come around, I said. Not because they're sorry, because they found out about the money. Robert was quiet for a moment. I could hear him setting down his pen. What do you need, Bianca? Protection, for the foundation and for myself. He walked me through it calmly, the way he did everything. The foundation was a separate legal entity, a 501c3 with its own board, its own accounts, its own governance. No family member had any claim to it. My personal inheritance from Jake's insurance was exactly that. Personal. Connecticut law was clear. Life insurance proceeds go to the named beneficiary. Period. No parent, sibling, or cousin has standing to contest it. But what about the pressure? I asked. The showing up? The voicemails? The guilt trips? We send a letter, Robert said. Cease and desist. Formal. Firm. It asks them to stop unsolicited contact, stop appearing at your home without invitation, and stop approaching foundation partners or associates. It's not a lawsuit. It's not legally binding either, but it puts them on notice. If they escalate, we'll have documentation for a restraining order. I thought about that word. Boundary. Dr. Shaw used it every week. It had always sounded clinical to me, like something in a textbook, not something you mail to your mother. Send it, I said. Robert paused. Are you sure? Once this letter goes out, the tone changes. I looked at the kitchen counter. Jake's mug. Still there, still unwashed. I kept it that way on purpose. One small rebellion against a world that wanted me to move on faster than I could. Robert, the tone changed the night they chose a birthday party over 3 funerals. He sent the letter by certified mail the following Monday. 3 copies, 3 addresses. 3 members of a family that had spent my entire life treating my silence as permission. The silence was over. Linda called Robert's office 48 hours after the letter arrived. His receptionist later told me she could hear my mother's voice through the receiver from across the room. A cease and desist? From my own daughter? How dare you turn my child against her family? Robert took the call. He told me afterward that he kept his voice the same temperature the entire time. Room temperature. Steady. Professional. Mrs. Ashford, I represent Bianca's legal interests. The letter is clear. Please respect its terms. She's not thinking straight, Linda snapped. Grief has made her irrational. You and that insurance money are filling her head with... The terms are clear. Have a good day. He hung up. But Linda wasn't done. She never was. Within a week, she drafted a letter of her own. Handwritten on her good stationery, the cream-colored kind she used for church correspondence, and mailed copies to 6 members of the Women's Fellowship. In it, she described a daughter, lost to grief and bad counsel, a family torn apart by outside influences, and a mother who was desperately trying to reach her child before it's too late. She asked them to pray. She asked them to intervene. She asked them to see her as the victim. One of those copies reached Pastor Grace. Grace read it at her desk that evening. She told me later that she sat with it for a full hour, turning it over in her hands, feeling the weight of the paper and the weightlessness of the words. Then she picked up the phone. Linda, I've been patient, but I was at that funeral. I saw those empty seats. Her voice was quiet and absolutely final. I will not circulate this letter, and I think it's time you stop telling people a story that isn't true. Silence on the line, then a click. It was the first time in Linda Ashford's life that someone in her community had looked her in the eye, even through a phone line, and said, I don't believe you. Grace called me that same night. Bianca, I thought you should know. Your mother isn't stopping, but neither is the truth. 6 months after the article, just past the 1-year anniversary, the Myers Family Foundation, now officially a 501c3, with MAD Connecticut as its anchor partner, held its first fundraising gala. We booked the Pond House in Elizabeth Park, a bright, windowed venue that overlooked the rose gardens. Not flashy, not corporate, just a room full of light and people who cared. 150 guests. My ER colleagues filled 2 tables. The MAD Connecticut chapter sent their regional director. Tom Whitfield was there with a photographer from The Current. Families we'd helped sat in the front row, including Maria Santos from Bridgeport, whose son's funeral we'd paid for when she couldn't afford more than a pine box. Robert Calloway handled logistics. Pastor Grace gave the invocation. The coordinator I'd hired, a former social worker named Janet, ran the silent auction. Everything felt intentional, earned, real. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium and looked out at 150 faces. The screen behind me glowed with 3 photographs. Jake in his Yukon sweatshirt, grinning. Lily on her first day of kindergarten, gap-toothed, holding a butterfly lunchbox. Noah at the beach, Captain the Bear Sandy and Soggy under one arm. I gripped the podium's edge, steadied myself. Then I spoke. My husband Jake believed in preparing for the worst, so the people he loved could have the best. He didn't know he'd be right. I paused. Swallowed. But because of him, 5 families this year didn't have to face their worst moments alone. 12 children still have a parent who can pay rent this month. 8 survivors are in counseling, and 3 funerals were held with dignity instead of debt. The room applauded. Maria Santos stood first, then the others. Tom's photographer captured the moment. Me at the podium, Jake's face on the screen, the audience rising. I didn't see them at first, but when the clapping faded and I stepped off the stage, I looked toward the back of the room, near the emergency exit half hidden behind a pillar. Linda and Megan, sitting in the last row, they hadn't been invited. Janet told me later they'd walked in during the dinner service when the check-in table was unmanned. She'd spotted them but didn't want to cause a scene mid-event. My mother stood near the coat rack in her Sunday lavender, the same dress from the church meeting. Her armor. She waited until the crowd around me thinned, until I was standing alone for a moment by the dessert table, holding a glass of water I hadn't sipped, and then she crossed the room. Bianca. Her voice was thick, practiced, eyes glistening under the event lighting. I'm so proud of you. 4 words I had waited 34 years to hear. And they arrived here, in front of a camera crew, surrounded by 150 witnesses, at an event she'd crashed. The timing told me everything the words didn't. Thank you for coming, I said. Polite, distant. The way you'd greet a colleague you barely knew. Linda flinched. Barely. Just a twitch at the corner of her mouth. But I saw it. Can we talk? She whispered. Somewhere private? There's nothing to discuss privately that wasn't already said publicly. I'm your mother, Bianca. I know. I held her gaze. That's what made it hurt. Megan appeared at Linda's elbow, breathless, as if she'd been gathering courage from across the room. Bianca, please. We're here. We showed up. I looked at my sister. She'd said those words like they should mean something, like physical presence erased everything. 6 months late, Megan. Before either of them could respond, Robert appeared at my side, calm, professional, perfectly timed. Bianca, the Maddie representative would like a moment with you before she leaves. I nodded. Excuse me, I said, to no one in particular, to both of them at once, and walked away. I didn't look back. But Janet told me later what happened. Linda stood in the center of that bright, crowded room, holding an untouched glass of sparkling water, and nobody spoke to her. Nobody approached. Nobody offered a chair. Megan tugged at her sleeve, and the 2 of them slipped out through the emergency exit. For the first time in her life, Linda Ashford walked into a room and discovered she was the least important person in it. The fallout came quietly. No explosions, no shouting matches. Just the slow, methodical rearrangement of a small town's loyalties. Within 2 weeks of the gala, Linda received a call from the Greenfield Community Church office. The Women's Fellowship was restructuring its leadership committee. Her position as co-chair, a role she'd held for 12 years, the crown jewel of her social identity, was being rotated to fresh voices. They thanked her for her years of service. They wished her well. The subtext was deafening. Linda stopped attending Sunday services after that. The first Sunday she missed, nobody called to check on her. The second Sunday, someone mentioned it at coffee hour, and Barbara Hensley said, "She probably needs time." Nobody argued. Nobody disagreed. Nobody reached for the phone. The neighborhood shifted too. Carol Dunning organized the annual block party in June, a task Linda had claimed for 9 years running. The invitation list went out. The Ashford household wasn't on it. Megan lost her circle piece by piece. Old friends stopped texting back. A group chat she'd been in since high school went quiet whenever she posted. She started seeing a therapist in April. Whether out of genuine remorse or social survival, I honestly don't know. Maybe both. People are complicated, even the ones who hurt you. Then, on a Tuesday evening, my phone buzzed with a text from an unsaved number. I almost deleted it, but something made me read. I should have said something that night. I know that now. "I'm sorry, kiddo. Not because of the article, because I was wrong. Dad." I read it twice, 3 times. Then I showed it to Dr. Shaw at our next session. "How does it feel?" she asked. I thought about it. Really thought. Like a door I don't need to open yet, but maybe someday. I saved the message. I didn't reply. Not yet. 1 year. November 14th again. A Tuesday. Just like the first one. Same gray Connecticut sky. Same damp chill that works its way under your collar and stays there. I drove to the cemetery before work. The graves were neat. I paid for maintenance, and I visited on the 1st and 15th of every month. But this day was different. This was the anniversary. The one everyone warns you about. I brought fresh flowers. Sunflowers for Jake, because he said roses were boring. A small bouquet of daisies shaped like butterflies for Lily. The florist had started making them special for me. And for Noah, a new captain. The original was buried with him, but I kept a rotation going. It felt right. It felt like something he'd understand. I sat on the grass between the 3 stones and talked to them the way I always did. Out loud, no self-consciousness, the way I used to talk to Jake while he was cooking and I was folding laundry in the next room. I told them about the foundation, about Maria Santos, whose son now had a headstone instead of a number, about the family in New London whose landlord had been about to evict them a week after their daughter's accident, about the grief counselor we'd hired full-time in January. I told Jake about his letter, how I kept it in my nightstand and read the last line whenever the house got too quiet, how I'd finally understood what he'd been doing those Sunday evenings, not hiding from me, but building a wall between me and the worst-case scenario. "You always said I take care of everyone but myself," I whispered. "I'm trying, Jake. I'm really trying." The wind picked up. The sunflowers bent sideways. Somewhere behind me, a cardinal landed on a branch and stayed there, watching me with one black eye, still as a heartbeat. I was different now. Not healed. I don't think that word applies. But different. Steadier. I said no when I meant no. I didn't apologize for taking up space. I didn't cook for people who hadn't earned a seat at my table. Dr. Shaw told me once, "You're not who you were a year ago." I said, "No. I'm who I should have been all along." If you're listening right now and you recognize your family in this story, the dismissiveness, the guilt trips, the way they make you feel like your pain is an inconvenience, I want you to hear something. You're not crazy. You're not dramatic. You're not ungrateful. Setting boundaries with family is the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than 12-hour ER shifts. Harder than reading Jake's letter for the first time. Harder, even, than standing in front of those 3 caskets in the rain. Because with grief, at least the world understands. People bring you flowers. They lower their voices. They give you space. But when you set a boundary with family, half the world tells you you're wrong. She's still your mother. Blood is thicker than water. You'll regret this when she's gone. I've heard all of it. From coworkers, from neighbors, from well-meaning strangers in the comments of Tom's article. And I understand why people say those things. They're not bad people. They just haven't sat on a hospital floor at 10 o'clock at night, listening to birthday music through a phone speaker, 3 hours after the world ended. Here's what I learned. The thing nobody told me, and I had to figure out alone. The people who love you will show up. Not with excuses, not with conditions, not next week. They'll show up. Jake showed up. Every single day of our marriage, he showed up. My coworkers showed up. In black scrubs, straight off shift, standing in the rain. Pastor Grace showed up. Tom showed up. And now, every family the foundation helps, they're my family too. I'm not telling you to cut off your parents. That's your call, not mine. But I am telling you this: your peace is not negotiable. And if someone treats your worst day as an inconvenience, you have every right to build a life without them in it. So where do things stand now? My father still texts sometimes. Short messages, never demanding. Thinking of you. Once. Saw a butterfly at the hardware store. Thought of Lily. I read everyone. I haven't replied yet. But I haven't blocked him either. That feels like enough for now. Linda is still Linda. Last month she recruited a family friend to call me. A woman named Diane who I haven't spoken to since high school. 10 minutes into the conversation, Diane casually mentioned, "Your mother isn't doing well. Her blood pressure, her nerves. Same playbook, same script." I recognized it the way you recognize a song you've heard 1,000 times. I wished Diane well and hung up. Megan sent a letter. Handwritten, on notebook paper. Not Linda's cream-colored stationery. Long. Messy. Ink smudges where she'd crossed things out and started over. "I'm in therapy now," she wrote. "I'm starting to see things I didn't want to see. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know." I put the letter in my nightstand drawer next to Jake's. I haven't answered it. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. Forgiveness isn't a door I've closed. But it's not one I'll walk through just because someone knocks. The foundation is growing. In its second year, we've helped 15 families. MAD Connecticut is a full partner. I was asked to testify at the state capitol about DUI sentencing reform. I said yes. I still work the night shift at Mercy General. Still wear the scrubs. Still clock in at 7 and clock out at 7. The money didn't change what I do. It changed what I'm able to build around it. And every night before I sleep, I whisper the same thing into the quiet of an empty house that isn't really empty at all. Good night, Jake. Good night, Lily. Good night, Noah. I carried your love today. I'll carry it again tomorrow. Last week, a 4-year-old girl came into my ER. She'd fallen off a swing and fractured her wrist. Not serious. Routine. But she was clutching a stuffed rabbit, and she was crying the way Noah used to cry. That high, breathless wail that isn't about the pain. Not really. It's about being scared. About wanting someone to say, "You're okay. I'm here." I held her good hand while Dr. Patel set the splint. I told her she was brave. I told her the rabbit was brave too. She stopped crying and asked me if the rabbit could have a bandage. I wrapped a piece of gauze around the rabbit's paw and she smiled so wide it broke something open inside my chest. I made it to the supply closet. 30 seconds. That's all I needed. 30 seconds to press my forehead against the shelf, breathe, and let the wave pass. Then I went back in, finished my shift, drove home. Grief doesn't end. It just changes shape. Some days it's a wave that knocks you sideways. Some days it's a whisper. But it's always there, always present, and that's okay. Because it means I loved them, and love doesn't expire. Jake left me $5 million. But the real inheritance was the lesson, the one I'm still learning. Every day, every shift, every time I visit those 3 graves with fresh flowers and a new captain for Noah. Show up. Not next week. Not when it's convenient. Not when the party's over. Now, if you're someone's person, be there. And if you can't be there, at least don't pretend you were. My name is Bianca Myers. I'm an ER nurse, a widow, a mother of angels, and the founder of the Myers Family Foundation. I'm still standing. Not because my family held me up, but because I finally learned to hold myself. And that's my story. Thank you for staying until the end. Now I want to hear yours. Drop a comment below. Have you ever had to set a boundary with someone you love? What happened? If Bianca's journey gave you even a little strength today, hit that subscribe button. And if you need another story like this one, there's one waiting for you in the description. I'll see you there.